अज ऐसा मौका फिर कहाँ मिलेगा, हमारे जैसा दिल कहाँ मिलेगा।
ओ सुन रहे हो? जी हाँ, इसी तरह हजारों और भी सुनने वाले हैं। आपके कारोबार की कामयाबी का राज सलाम BCR। सुनते रहिए सलाम BCR।
This is Project Radio, online, on air, everywhere.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मैं हूं जान रेम्बो और आप मेरी आवाज़ इस वक्त जिस रेडियो स्टेशन पर सुन रहे हैं उसका नाम है सलाम BCR। सलाम BCR की तमाम टीम को और तमाम सुनने वालों को मेरा प्यार भरा सलाम। तो सुनते रहिए सलाम BCR।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे दोस्तों, मैं सखावत नाज ते सुनते रहो सलाम BCR।
Want to be on radio? Then log into our website www.project29.org.uk and email me items for more details.
हमारा मिशन अल्लाह की रजा, मोहम्मद से वफा, पाकिस्तान का दिफा। हम हैं सलाम BCR।
सलाम BCR की एक दीनी और तालीमी काविश आपकी सूरत के लिए हमने अब ऑनलाइन दीनी तालीम का इंतजाम किया है। दुनिया के किसी भी खित्ते से अब आप खुद और अपने बच्चों को भी दीनी तालीम दिलवा सकते हैं। आइए आपकी सूरत के मुताबिक और मुनासिब फीस पे घर बैठे सीखिए कुरान अल्लाह का पैगाम इंसानियत के नाम। मज़ीद मालूमात के लिए 07424888304 पर राब्ता करें। नंबर याद रहे 07424888304। असाज़ा के नाम भी राब्ता कर सकते हैं।
अज ऐसा मौका फिर कहाँ मिलेगा, हमारे जैसा दिल कहाँ मिलेगा।
तवज्जो चाहिए। क्या आपका कोई प्यारा या रिश्तेदार UK आने का ख्वाहिशमंद है? सलाम BCR स्पॉन्सर कर रहा है ऐसे ही हजरात को टू वर्क, स्टडी एंड प्ले इन UK। तालीम याफ्ता हजरात के लिए एक हसीन मौका। टू वर्क, स्टडी एंड प्ले इन UK। ख्वाहिशमंद हजरात फौरन राब्ता करें क्योंकि प्लेसेस आर लिमिटेड। इट्स फर्स्ट कम फर्स्ट सर्व। मजीद मालूमात के लिए फोन 07424888304 या 07912622961। तो देर किस बात की, फोन उठाएं, नंबर मिलाएं। नंबर याद रहे 07424888304 या 07912622961। Terms and conditions apply.
ऐसा मौका फिर कहाँ मिलेगा, हमारे जैसा दिल कहाँ मिलेगा।
शुक्रिया।
मैं हनी अलबेला। सुनते रहिए सलाम BCR।
सलाम से है सलामती हमारी, हमारे अहलो अयाल की और कुल इंसानियत की। मिल जाइए सलाम BCR के साथ और लेकर चलते हैं सलामती का पैगाम इंसानियत के नाम। सलाम BCR, आपका अपना लोकल रेडियो।
हमारा मिशन अल्लाह की रजा, मोहम्मद से वफा, पाकिस्तान का दिफा। हम हैं सलाम BCR।
अस्सलामु अलैकुम अलैकुम या अस्सलामु अलैकुम अलैकुम या अस्सलामु अलैकुम अलैकुम या अस्सलामु अलैकुम अलैकुम या। Love and peace and all of my happiness, yeah, to everyone that I meet, 'cause I'm feeling spectacular. I love it when we love one another. Give thanks every day for this life, living with a smile on my face. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah.
आज इस्लाम के सामने आप सुन सलाम BCR और मैं आज सोमवार की शाम 4:36 पे आपको सलाम BCR के स्टूडियो से कहता हूँ खुश आमदीद जियान बिस्मिल्लाह। उम्मीद है मेरे प्यारे बहन भाइयों के आप खैरियत से होंगे, कहीं भी हैं कबूल कीजिए मेरा प्यार भरा सलाम, ढेर सारी दुआएं और अल्लाह आपको सलामत रखे, खुश रखे, आबाद रखे। उम्मीद है कि आपका वीकेंड खुशगवार गुजरा होगा और अभी तो एक्सटेंशन है ना, क्योंकि बैंक हॉलीडे मंडे और फिर लोग काम पे हैं। ये मेरे जैसों की किस्मत में है कि हमें मंडे बैंक हॉलीडे हो या कुछ भी हो, हमें ड्यूटी देनी पड़ती है। बहरहाल एनीवे मज़ा आता है आपके साथ बातचीत करके। उम्मीद है कि आप लोग भी पसंद करते होंगे और इंतज़ार करते होंगे कि हक साहब कब लाइन पे आएँ और उनसे बात करें। मेरी तरफ से कबूल कीजिए ढेर सारी दुआएं और अल्लाह आपको सलामत रखे, खुश रखे, आबाद रखे अपने प्यारे हबीब के सदके। आप कहीं भी सुन रहे हैं, अस्सलाम वालेकुम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah.
जी आप सुन रहे हैं ग्रेटर मैनचेस्टर में यकीनन बोल्टन, ब्लैकबर्न, रॉचडेल, ओल्डहम, स्टॉकपोर्ट, शीडल, ऑटिंगम और इसके गिर्द बहुत से गली कूंज तक हमारी आवाज़ आप तक आ रही होगी सलाम BCR की तरफ से। अस्सलाम वालेकुम, हैव अ वेरी नाइस बैंक हॉलीडे मंडे। प्यारा मौसम, बाहर कितना प्यारा मौसम है, एंजॉय कर रहे होंगे। तो देखिए हमें भी कुछ उसका चस्का सुनाइए ना, दिखाइए ना कि आप कहाँ हैं, क्या कर रहे हैं और हमारे साथ शेयर कीजिए आपकी जो भी हालात हैं। अगर आप ग्रेटर मैनचेस्टर में सुन रहे हैं यकीनन आप बोल्टन, ब्लैकबर्न, रॉचडेल, ओल्डहम, स्टॉकपोर्ट, शीडल, ऑटिंगम और इसके गिर्द बहुत से गली कुछ तक हमारी आवाज़ आप तक आ रही होगी। आप मुझे फ़ोन करके बताइए कि कहाँ हैं आप, क्या कर रहे हैं। और अगर आप कहीं दूर दराज सुन रहे हैं तो फिर यकीनन आप SalamBCR.com या project29.org.uk की वेबसाइट पर भी हमारे साथ शामिल होंगे। तो इंशाअल्लाह उसके बाद ये आप जो वेबसाइट्स मैंने आपको बताई हैं ना, ये आप अपने लैपटॉप पे, डेस्कटॉप पे, आईपैड पे या अपनी मोबाइल फ़ोन पे, बेशर्ते कि आपके पास इंटरनेट है, कहीं भी आप हों, आप जाके हमारे साथ रह सकते हैं, प्रोग्राम को सुन सकते हैं, प्रोग्राम में हिस्सा ले सकते हैं। और मैं आपको मज़े की बात बताऊं कि ये जो एप्लीकेशंस हैं इनको डाउनलोड करने में आपका कोई ख़र्च नहीं होता, बिल्कुल मुफ्ती में आप इन्हें डाउनलोड कर सकते हैं। तो इंशाअल्लाह उम्मीद रखता हूं कि आप ज़रूर इन चीज़ों से फ़ायदा उठाते होंगे। ठीक है, आज मेरा एक ख़ास टॉपिक है जो मैं आपके साथ शेयर करना चाहूँ कि जो पिछले दिनों इलेक्शंस हुए और उन्होंने किस तरह यहाँ हुकूमत पे या लोकल अथॉरिटीज़ हैं असरअंदाज हुए हैं, उस पर बात करेंगे। लेकिन कुछ लोगों ने अपने ख़तरात भी, अपनी जो ना सोच है वो लोगों के साथ मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया में उन्होंने शेयर की है। तो मैं आपको ना ये एक शेयर करने जा रहा हूँ ताकि आप भी ज़रा उससे बाखबर हो जाएं कि क्या हो रहा है दुनिया में और दुनिया की सोच किस तरह बदल रही है। ये जो फ़लस्तीन में हंगामा है, लोग इसे कहते हैं कि इट्स अ जंग, इट्स नॉट अ वॉर, इट्स एक्चुअली अ डिस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ अ पीपल, अ जेनोसाइड ऑफ अ पीपल एंड हु आर ऑलरेडी कैप्चर्ड विद इन एन ओपन प्रिजन। तो चलिए ये ना आपको मैंने आपके मेरे ख्याल से पिछले हफ्ते इसका कुछ तज़किरा किया था कि लोगों के जो ख़दशात हैं। तो लीजिए सुनिए, ये जेम्स साहब हैं। कौन है ये जेम्स साहब? ये हैं जी अपने LGBTQ LBC रेडियो के एक होस्ट हैं। तो वो क्या कह रहे हैं, लीजिए आप सुनिए और इंशाअल्लाह मैं भी आपके साथ सुनता एंजॉय करता हूँ।
Well, I think we'll do what we suggested we might do, and we'll take Max's point and run with it. Mystery Hour on the way at 12, of course. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. But I know what's going to happen now. I'm going to say that crikey, I hadn't really thought of it like that before, but that's a really, really good point. And you ring in and go, or you'll sit at home or at work or wherever you are, and you'll just go, flipping heck, James. Whatever next? The Pope is a Catholic, or the lavatorial habits of wood-based bears? What are you going to be taken aback by next? And I do remember people talking about October the 7th being Israel's 9/11, right? It may even have appeared in headlines. October the 7th is Israel's 9/11. It didn't occur to me then that the second act of 9/11 might also be on the horizon. And as Max suggested, the response to 9/11, whether in Afghanistan or in Iraq or anywhere else, has got a much bigger place in history, hasn't it, than the terrorist atrocity that launched it. The response, if you like, has dwarfed the origin. And 7 months after October the 7th, I think it's probably time to ask whether that's true, because that is the best simple way of understanding what we've been talking about since 10 o'clock this morning. That is the very best simple account for a generational shift in support for, as opposed to sympathy with, the modern state of Israel. I'm not really going to do Idiot's Corner today, but I'm reading out comments from members of the Israeli government. Obviously, there are members of Hamas who say disgusting things as well, but I don't think, as a supporter of Israel, you should be calling upon me to treat them as equivalent or the same, because then you're saying Israel might as well be a proscribed terrorist group. The whole point about a country with which we are allies is that we not only expect them to abide by higher standards than countries which we consider to be either enemies or under the jackboot of a terrorist regime, on a completely different moral plane. So I understand why, listening to the first hour of the program today, you're desperately looking around for something to push back against. But the idea that a terrorist in the Israeli government or a far-right member of it saying something absolutely outrageous and genocidal, let's not beat about the bush, that is a genocidal comment that the security minister has made. It is calling for the memory of Amalek to be blotted out. That is unless those words mean things that I don't understand, that is a genocidal ambition being expressed by Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister. I don't think it helps Israel's cause by saying, yeah, that's as bad as what Hamas say. That's the point that Jonathan Portes makes in a tweet this morning about there being no significant moral distinction between Israeli and Hamas leadership. And that's where the September the 11th analogy, I think, takes flight. Because you look back now on the Bush and Blair coalition in Iraq and you see it as something that was epically wrong, catastrophically, cataclysmically wrong. Please God, the death tolls involved in Gaza are never going to come close to the death tolls involved in Iraq or Afghanistan, but look at the ramifications. The Taliban are back in charge in Afghanistan. The failure to have a plan in place for dealing with Iraq after Saddam Hussein essentially spawned the genesis of ISIS, civil war in Syria, the Middle East continuing to burn, and cleverer people than me will track back various events across that part of the world to the original invasion and the subsequent vacuum, the subsequent aftermath. And so, I mean, two things occur to me. The first is stop saying, or don't stop saying it, because it's important that people are aware of it. But if you think you're defending Israel when you point out that their hotheads sound as genocidal and as mad as Hamas's hotheads, but your hotheads are in the actual government, I don't think you're doing what you think you're doing. But I do appreciate how difficult this conversation must be for people who are on the refuge side of Israel's legacy and Israel's history. I wonder whether, actually, Joe Biden was a little bit further ahead of the action than we were. And he spotted this parallel a little earlier. This is him speaking in Tel Aviv on October the 18th, so just 11 days after the original terror attack.
since this terrorist attack took place, we've seen it described as Israel's 9/11. But for a nation the size of Israel, it was like 15 9/11s. The scale may be different, but I'm sure those horrors have tapped into some kind of primal feeling in Israel, just like it did and felt in the United States. Shock, pain, rage, an all-consuming rage. I understand, and many Americans understand. You can't look at what has happened here to your mothers, your fathers, your grandparents, sons, daughters, children, even babies, and not scream out for justice. Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. I'm the first U.S. president to visit Israel in time of war. I've made wartime decisions. I know the choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. There's always cost.
Wow. 9 minutes after 11 is the time. So have we reached the point that Joe Biden warned about in the middle of October of last year, just under a fortnight after the October the 7th terror attack? But Joe Biden almost there, seeing the writing on the wall. And Max in Cambridge, I think, expressing a fairly persuasive case for arguing, yeah, Israel has done that. Israel has managed to turn the reaction into a bigger historical moment, and arguably a bigger historical atrocity than the attack which spawned the response. I mean, who would argue with that analysis in the context of 9/11? Who would say, don't be ridiculous, what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere in the Middle East is nowhere near as serious or as significant or as important as what happened in New York and elsewhere in America on 9/11? What would that be? You know, who would possibly even begin to challenge that analysis? I don't think anybody would. So how would you challenge it in the context of what's happened since October the 7th? Has Israel done a George W. Bush and essentially turned the response into a bigger historical atrocity than the atrocity that spawned the response? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. My inbox is hotting up again, which is nice. This is unsigned. Remember the hostages, James. We began by talking about the hostages because a government minister has said that the deal to release 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for a pause in the killing in Gaza, an Israeli minister, an Israeli government minister, has described that deal as terrible and suggested that it would throw the sacrifices of Israeli soldiers so far in the trash. And he has claimed that it would, well, I'll tell you exactly what he said. The deal is horrible and terrible. A government that throws everything in the trash in order to return 22 or 33 people has no right to exist. So, I mean, very much there, the settlement minister, Orit Strouk, remembering the hostages and violently dismissing any plan designed to release them, even as other supporters of Israel continue to claim that the desire to see the hostages released is what justifies the continuing carnage in Gaza. And you know, the more we talk about it today, the more I feel the clouds clearing on the motivations and the positions of the young people that we've been talking about. That idea that if you were just watching this, so you watched October the 7th, you thought that's absolutely awful. Maybe I'll try and find out what the history is here, what has happened here. What is the grievance of these murderers, for example? You say, right, okay, so that's the grievance, and why did that happen, and what's the history? And now you're watching what Israel is doing in Gaza, and if you are, I don't know, if you're thinking clearly and objectively, it looks like 9/11 now. And as someone who not only recognises the importance of Israel, but if you're someone who needs Israel, if Israel is the place that you go when it starts again, when the persecutions start again, when the pogroms start again, if Israel is that place in your heart, in your mind, how today are you processing the possibility that what Netanyahu has done is 9/11's second act, the massive overreaction to the detriment of the entire world. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Jack's in Welshpool. Jack, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
I do agree that that the 7th of October attacks were on the same level as the 9/11 attacks. It was a complete and utterly horrible and disgusting act from Hamas. However, I will agree with the fact that I think that Israel's response to this can be the equivalent of the Americans' response to 9/11 of the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. And it's different. I've got an analogy, and it's difficult because it involves Nazi Germany. Can you bear with me?
Well, yeah. Can you think of a better one or a different one or a slightly? Because I don't. I mean, we've literally just remembered the Holocaust. We've literally just defined Israel's role as the place to which Jewish people go in their hearts and their heads when the persecution starts again. So I'm sure that you can think of an analogy that doesn't actually have to compare the Israeli government to the Nazis. I'm sure.
I'm trying not to.
All
it's
right.
just very hard to do so when you look at the coalition government in Israel. 3 members of that coalition government, the 3 member parties, are far-right parties that have ideologies
that is
such as
actually true. Yes,
ultra-Zionism and anti-Muslims, and I'm disgusted by the fact that America and Britain support that government. Like, I support Israel,
yes,
but I don't support the government. It's the same as I support Palestine, but I don't support Hamas.
It's not
and
difficult, is it? It's not difficult.
It's not difficult, and that's how my generation look at it. Is that we support the people, we just don't support the people that are supposedly representing the people.
And and that's when all the worst stuff happens in history. The problem we also have is not knowing how many people do support the people that we don't support. Netanyahu's coalition is so complicated and so dedicated to political survival that it's almost impossible to get any idea of what the proper mandate looks like. You can make your analogy because freedom of speech is important, but I do reserve the right to tick you off afterwards or even halfway through.
I agree.
Go on then.
My analogy mainly is that the Nazis' Kristallnacht.
Yes.
That was a grossly over-the-top response to a Jewish man killing a German diplomat in France. That was over the top. Again, they were doing it for the reasons of trying to push the Jews out.
And to demonise and to make everybody of a certain ethnicity or responsible for the actions of a tiny minority. And I think Gaza does look like that through the eyes of some of the ministers that you've just referred to. They don't believe in the concept of an innocent Palestinian.
Yeah, and that's why I was very... I completely understand that trying to bring up Nazi Germany in this discussion is very difficult and very. I feel wrong. I feel dirty for bringing it up.
Well, we could have stuck with 9/11. That's a pretty powerful analogy, but you've given us another layer of analogy, which in the very tight specifics of what happened that night, probably at least stays within the confines of logic. Whether it's appropriate or not is for other people to reflect upon. Jack, thank you, mate. 11:17 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:19 is the time. Mystery hour on the way, which is I often say I think we're all in need of a bit of love.
जी मैं आपको चाहूँगा ये जो अगला पीस आ रहा है ना इस पे ज़रा गौर व फिक्र कीजिए और सुनिए कि वो जो बंदा फ़ोन पे है वो क्या कह रहा है.
Today, here's the first. The amount of, as a supporter of Israel, how do you feel about ... questions you've done in the last 4 months has been so sad to hear. It's time to call out the government and all its supporters. That one is unsigned. This one is not. This is from Matthew Millett. And he has heard, well, that person has heard people, or me, going in far too soft on the government of Israel. Matthew Millett has heard, and I quote, pig-ignorant Jew hatred. Well done, James. Adding, are there any fringe cranks with whom James will not nod along? To which the answer is yes, mate. You. Hassan is in Boreham Wood. Hassan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think the response that Israel has taken exceeds the response to 9/11.
Oh, come on.
And the reason being is Afghanistan wasn't occupied by the U.S. Gaza and the West Bank are.
Right.
And so you've got an
occupied by Israel.
Yeah, by Israel.
Yes.
Right. You've got
just for people not across all of the facts, that is a political and a geopolitical matter of fact, an international law matter of fact.
Yes. So you've got an occupied people that are in Gaza, and you've got a militant group, terrorist group that have carried out an atrocity. The people of Gaza have, since 2005, have no agency there in terms of changing anything. And now they've been bombed into oblivion. And just that text that you read out before the Jack's call, I think, it was about bring the hostages home. When in history has anyone ever tried to get hostages out by bombing the place where they're at into oblivion? When you see what's gone on in the last 6 months. And I'll be honest, me and my wife, we sit at home in the evenings after putting our children to sleep, and we'll scroll through Instagram reels, tears in our eyes, thinking that these children that are dying look like my children, and the reason that it's being allowed to happen is because they look like my children. That's the conclusion we draw. That whether the government in this country.
I mean, the children in Ukraine look like my children, and that's being allowed to happen as well.
It's not silence.
No,
from
you're
our
right.
Government.
You're right. But equally,
our government
hasn't weighed in against Russia any more than it's weighed in against. Well, no, it's not. That doesn't really work as a comparison, except on skin tone. So I'll withdraw that comment.
So when we look at what's happening, when we look at arms are still being sold to Israel to bomb children that look like mine, and I've got tears in my eyes thinking my 5 and 6 year old are just. Is this how the world looks at my kids? Yeah. Is this literally, children with no agency are being bombed in refugee camps and by an occupying force, and we're selling arms to them.
I thought you were out of your tree when you came on and said that it's worse than 9/11, but under this analysis, it's kind of hard to argue with you.
Yeah, I live in Boreham Wood, and right in front of the train station. Not on October 8th, not on October 9th. Well into after about 5,000 Palestinians had been killed.
Yeah.
You got a massive flag up of Israel. And I look at that every day, and I think that is in support of the reaction. That's not, for the hostages.
It was originally for it was
not in the middle of October. It wasn't. It would be early days of October. And if you are in support of the hostages, then you got to want to stop the bombing, because you're bombing the place where they are. And the reason that you're supporting the bombing, is because the kids that are dying look like my kids. And that breaks my heart. And it makes me feel like maybe this isn't the country that I need to live in anymore. If my government and the leader of the opposition can't call that out, then maybe this isn't the place for my family. I was born here. My kids were born here. My wife was born here. Yes, my parents were immigrated in the 60s. But maybe this isn't the place for us.
Can I say anything to reassure you?
I'm not sure I can, because until the government changes policy or the policy makers make a stand, I don't feel like I'm welcome.
Because the government is in lockstep with and the Labour Party has not put much distance between itself and the government position, and you see that.
For me to raise my children when kids that look like my kids are not thought about.
And yet, I could take a Jewish caller, and I will, when we're discussing a different subject, who will talk about some of the rhetoric and banners that have been seen on the pro-Palestinian marches. Let me finish. And they will say, is this a place where I can raise my children?
And I would say, look at what the government policies are. Yeah. Are the government policies supporting their position or defending the children that look like my children?
So it's the political landscape.
That's why we march. I take my kids to the marches. They're 5 and 6. I take them. Every time there's a march, we take them. And we take them because there's children that look like them that are dying every day, that are being pulled out of the rubble. And this, from the political classes, this silence, a deafening silence that makes us feel that we're not worth we're not worth saving.
I'm so sorry that you feel like that.
I literally, I'm not. I mean, I've got my voice is breaking a bit.
I know it is.
We are over the last few months. We have been trying to figure out: do we need to emigrate? Do we need to go to the Middle East? Do we go to Dubai?
Why
to Bahrain?
forgive me for patronising you? Okay, promise.
Yeah.
But why not derive support from the people marching around you when you're marching for peace and seeing that they come from? And you're going to say because of the government, right? This all roads lead.
I'm going to say look at yeah, absolutely. Look, called hate marches, shut them down. There's been too many.
But then there's people pushing back against that, and they're your neighbours and your friends as well.
And our policy's changing, James. Has anyone spoken of changing? Let's have an arms embargo. Has anyone in senior positions?
Well, SNP, the SNP, have you? I'm not making light of your pain, Hassan, but you could. I mean, Scotland's not as far away as Dubai. That's got to be an easier hop, hasn't it? I'm joking around, obviously, with a very serious matter. But the answer to your question is yes.
जी सामने अस्सलाम वालेकुम। ये आपने सुना एक मुसलमान की दर्द भरी कहानी कि वो क्या समझ रहे हैं कि उनके साथ क्या हो रहा है, या उन्हें अब इस मुल्क में रहने का हक भी है या कि नहीं। आप सुने सलाम BCR मीडिया वो 1566। मैं हूँ आपका मेज़बान हक अनवर हक। 5:02 हुआ जाते हैं। चलिए अब एक छोटे से कमर्शियल के लिए और फिर वापस आएंगे तो इंशाल्लाह प्रोग्राम को जारी और सारी रखेंगे। सुनते रहिए सलाम BCR। मैं हूँ हक अनवर हक। अल्लाहु अकबर, अल्लाहु अकबर।
Assalamualaikum, you're listening to Salam BCR.
Here we are.
हमारा मिशन अल्लाह की रजा, मोहम्मद से वफा, पाकिस्तान का दिफा। हम हैं सलाम BCR।
अजी ऐसा मौका फिर कहाँ मिलेगा, हमारे जैसा दिल कहाँ मिलेगा।